why are these people in so much pain? Because you can
Mm,
see it, you can feel it. I just thought these people, they had everything, materially. Why are they so unhappy? That just doesn't make sense, right? So I started asking myself, well, what is the root cause of pain? And the
mm,
moment I wanted the answer, and it was a conviction in me, it's like, I'm going to figure this out. And I want to say it was probably just 3 days later. It was as soon as like 3 days later. I don't even remember what I was doing. And suddenly this sentence just flowed through me. And the sentence said, the root cause of pain is when you desire for the things that don't belong to you. And
mm.
that moment, the instant I heard that, I was liberated. I suddenly felt this sense of freedom. Also, I suddenly understood the meaning of going with the flow. Because
Mm.
before, as someone with a type A personality who's very driven, always hits my goals and targets, like what are you talking about going with the flow? Like, no, I create the flow. What are you gonna get by going with the flow? That's lazy.
Mm.
Right? But that moment I understood what that meant.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to the Boom Vision podcast. I'm really excited to share this week's guest, Tian Mu, who's an entrepreneur, quantum healer, and self mastery mentor. I am in awe of Tian's entrepreneurial and spiritual journey as he shares how life unfolds for him in such a divine way. How does this veteran gaming executive evolve to a spiritual entrepreneur and self mastery mentor? You gotta tune in to hear Tian's story and seeds of wisdom he shares in this week's episode. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Ye. This show is about how you can thrive. It's when you build success in alignment with your mind, body, and soul. I created this podcast to give you perspectives and frameworks on how to strengthen your mindset and gain clarity in your purpose. It's time for you to live an extraordinary life with vision that you design. Let's get to work. We are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically. This quote was by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Welcome to episode 36 of the Boom Vision podcast. Folks, I feel inspired as I share today's interview with Tian Mu. I met Tian last year through our mutual friend, Roberta Kung. From that first Zoom call, I just felt this familiar connection where I knew we're going to be good friends. I was so grateful for Roberta connecting us. The more we hung out, the more I realized Tian is my soul brother. As a brief background, Tian Mu spent the first 2 decades of his career as a tech entrepreneur. From gaming to e-commerce to crypto investments. In 2009, Tian had his spiritual awakening and began focusing on self-realization while running his game studio. Tian's main purpose this lifetime is to assist the awakening of the mass consciousness and help usher humanity into the next golden age. So without further ado, here's Tian. Tian Mu, welcome to the Boom Vision podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Tian, I would love for you to start in sharing with us your origin story. Where did it all start? What led to what you are doing today and also going forward?
Wow, how far back?
However far you want to go. I always share with my guests, what are the main highlights and chapters that you want to share, and we can always go deeper into it as things unfold.
Okay. Well, born in China, lived in China for the first 12 years of my life, moved to the US when I was 12 years old. In high school, I learned computer 3D graphics and animation. And so my very first job, I worked as a game designer when I was 15 years old. So every summer since in high school, I would work at a different game studio. And then in college, my freshman year, I taught myself HTML. And then that very summer, this was the summer of 97, I went to China and built one of the first websites for the Chinese government. So then throughout my college years, I would build these websites for various companies and organizations. And then in junior year of college, I went to MIT to visit one of my closest friends from high school. And as we were shooting pool, he shared this game idea with me. And he said, hey, he and his friend came up with this brilliant game idea and had like an all new business model. And he just wanted to give my feedback and see what I thought of it. And I absolutely loved that idea. And I thought, I think this is probably the future of gaming. So maybe let's do this one day. So this was junior year. This is 1999. After college, I moved to London. I worked there for a bit, experienced Europe, which was amazing. Came back to the US or back to LA actually to build this website for a distant learning company. This was end of 2000. And then I just got involved in 3 or 4 other tech companies, tech startups, and had a great time. Burned myself out in like a year and a half. And I decided to take a little break and did music for a bit, for a few months. But then that's when the game idea came back to me, this game idea that my friend shared with me. And it just stayed with me and it grabbed me and it just occupied all of my being for the next couple of months. It was the only thing I could think about, and also even almost every night I would dream about it. And of course in the beginning I had these excuses, right? Like there's part of me that was just really excited, really wanted to do this, but this other part of me would say, well, you never started a game studio before. You had worked in game studios, but you don't know how to do this. You never started a company before. How do you know how to do this and that? And then this other voice, more quiet but very wise voice will also come in and say, yeah, but you're also very smart, you're capable, you're hardworking, you're resourceful. You had also done many other things that you had never done before and you succeeded at them. So why would this one be any different? So after I would say a couple months of back and forth, I literally just ran out of excuses for not starting this. So April 17, 2002, that's when I started my game studio called Naked Sky Entertainment with my partner, Josh Glazer and Sam Tebow out of our little apartment in Sherman Oaks, California. So that was, my first venture. We ran that for 17 years. We exited in 2019. And then I would say end of 2009, I had my spiritual awakening, and that was a big moment for me. And ever since then, my whole life, my whole outlook on life, everything's just, I would say, shifted and expanded. And even the way I ran my company became very different. Before, I would say before that awakening, I ran the company from, behind my closed office door, right? Me and my partners made all the decisions together, and then we would just announce it to the team. But after that, I just became very transparent. We would share all the data, like whatever we're going through, I would tell the team, it just really operate from a place, I would say from a place of love, versus a place of fear. And then end of 2017, another big moment came to me, and it was through this very powerful vision. I would say it came through me, and it showed me to start this shoe company. It's an e-commerce platform for men's shoes, basically. And the cause behind that is really to help solve the homelessness issue in the United States, right? It's to so basically for every pair of shoes we sell, we would donate a pair to someone experiencing homelessness right here in America. So I launched that company end of 2017. I'm still running it right now. And again, it just, once you're on the path, when that moment, I would say, I didn't have any passion for e-commerce or shoes. That just wasn't my thing. But when this calling came, I recognized it and I just surrendered to it and said yes. But my agreement was, look, I'll do my part, but universe, you have to do your part. You bring me the resources, you bring me the partners, whatever I needed. And sure enough, that's what the universe did. I mean, it was probably the easiest and fastest race, right? I raised close to like $100,000 in just 2 months. Just by even not even actively going out raising money, but just telling friends about it. Telling strangers at a party, and people would just say, "Hey, I want to be part of this. Like, can I give you my money?" So that was also beautiful. And then 2009, another calling, or not a calling, but a knock on my shoulder, or a tap on my shoulder, I would say. It's like time to really get into crypto space. So me and a few friends that I pulled together, we started a small crypto investment fund, and that was beautiful. And I thought I would stay in this for a long time, but end of last year, literally November last year, I would say my higher self started telling me it's time to get out. It is time to get out. So I did. And literally, me and one other partner, we got out the week before the big crash.
Wow.
So yeah, that was pretty phenomenal. And then last year, in March of last year, I launched a mentoring program. It's a group mentoring program. So far I've had 4 cohorts, and they're all entrepreneurs and young professionals in their 20s and early 30s. So yeah, that's something that I've been doing as well. Very, very rewarding, very fulfilling. And also right now I'm producing a film and advising 3 other companies, one in the gaming space, one in tech, one in retail. So I'm just having fun. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah. Wow. Dan, it sounds like you've gone through several chapters and there's so much to unpack in what you just shared. And so I guess before we dive into, because one question I want to ask is definitely in 2008, when you had that spiritual awakening, I'd love to understand what triggered it. But before we get into that, I have this burning question in my mind, which is, since you're a gamer, what's your favorite game of all time, man?
Oh my God, of all time.
Yeah.
Well,
Or
the one that
which game has the most, was the most meaningful for you? Let's put it that way.
it's Doom.
Really?
By id Software. Yeah, that was the game that made me want to make games. And what's
Ah,
interesting was actually I was so obsessed with the game and the creators. I studied, I looked them up, as much as I could at the time. This was 1994. Right.
right.
I actually read up on, the co-founders of the company, the history of the company. But the funny thing was, literally a year after I founded my studio, I was able to bring on board one of the original founders of id Software as my VP of Biz Dev, Dave.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. I reached out to him first because he and another co-founder of id, America McGee, they founded a game fund called Carbon 6. So I had read about them, so I reached out to them, told them who we are, what we're trying to do, and I just started talking to Dave, and then that relationship just blossomed, and next thing I knew, I was able to get him on board as as our VP of Biz Dev. But also through him, we formed this beautiful relationship with Epic Games, and at the time, Jay Wilbur was their, I think, president or VP of Biz Dev. And Jay Wilbur at one point was the CEO of id Software. So it's just such a small world. And when I got in touch with Dave Taylor and actually was able to bring him on board to my company, that's when I realized anyone and everyone in this world is within reach.
Hmm.
Right? Like, no
Hmm.
matter who you think, oh, is your idol, is this big hero, but if you have something special, right, and there's something you really want to do, and you just feel this passion, this purpose, I guarantee you reach out to those people, that energy will touch them in some way, and
Hmm.
will respond.
I love
Right?
that.
Yeah, I mean, really, through him, I was like, oh, I could reach out to anyone. And I reached out to Steve Jobs at one point. And then he sent his game guide to me and I had a meeting with him.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome, man. I growing up, for me, I dived into gaming in I think it was like third grade. I really wanted a Nintendo because I didn't have a lot of toys growing up. And I was a straight C student back then in elementary school, but my parents gave me a challenge where it's like, hey, if you get straight A's this next end of the year, then we'll buy you a Nintendo. I was like, what? Okay, let's get that Nintendo, and that set me on this path of being a gamer. But I think the game for me would have been Secret of Mana. Was a role playing game. I don't know if you're familiar with that
Oh,
one or
I
not.
love that game. And then Chrono Trigger
And then
afterwards.
Chrono Trigger. Those are my top two, but I would say Secret of Mana is what sparked my love for role playing games.
Hmm.
And there's a separate personal story I'll share later on what that ties to a different question I'm going to ask you. But what I want to ask is in 2009 you mentioned that, I mean, because you've had that gaming for 17 years, right? But somewhere midway something awakened in you, and so I'd love to understand what either a specific event or what triggered that awakening and what changed and shifted for you from that event.
So it wasn't a specific event. I mean, sort of. There were a series of events, I would say, but I would say it was simply my time
Mm.
and nothing else. Right. And because it was my time, then the universe placed certain people in my life, certain questions in me that I needed answers to. And the big one really was, what was the root cause of pain? That was the question I wanted answered. Because in 2009, we were at the time working on the Star Trek game, with J.J. Abrams when when they announced that he was doing the next Star Trek film,
Mm.
and William Morris, that was our agent at the time, they took us to JJ and to Paramount, and they chose us as the developer to make the game alongside the film. So we were doing actually really well at the time, financially. And my studio was in Miracle Mile, which is just right next door to Beverly Hills, as you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I had a lot of meetings in Beverly Hills, a lot of lunch meetings, dinners. So I was surrounded by a lot of, I would say, very successful people, right? At least materially and financially. But one thing I noticed in a lot of those people, and just even strangers, when you're driving in your car and you look at the car next to you and look at the driver, you look at his face or her face, you just see like, why are these people in so much pain? Because you can
Mm.
see it, you can feel it. I just thought these people, they had everything, materially. Why are they so unhappy? That just doesn't make sense. Right. So I started asking myself, well, what is the root cause of pain? And then I suddenly remembered a friend of mine from college. She was studying Buddhism, and she has said that in Buddhism, they say the root cause of pain is desire. Now, I think the actual saying is it's the root cause of pain is desire and attachment. So either she didn't tell me the attachment part or I didn't remember it. So all I remembered was desire, right? So she said this to me, and for whatever reason, I just remembered it and I stored it in the back of my head. And that moment when I was like, what is causing pain? And suddenly I remember this sentence. But there's something about the sentence just did not sit well with me. Because to me, without desire, we would never create anything. Right. And there's so much beauty and there's a lot of amazing things we created in this world, right? Whether it's like music or art or architecture,
Yeah.
right? And they all came from this place of desire. So to me, I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. It's probably there's something else too. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure out what that something else is. Like, what's missing from that statement? And the
Mm.
moment I wanted the answer, and it was a conviction in me, it's like, I'm gonna figure this out. And I want to say it was probably just 3 days later. It was as soon as like 3 days later. I don't even remember what I was doing. And suddenly this sentence just flowed through me. And the sentence said, the root cause of pain is when you desire for the things that don't belong to you. And
Mm.
that moment, the instant I heard that, I was liberated. I suddenly felt this the sense of freedom. Also, I suddenly real understood the meaning of going with the flow. Because
Mm.
before, as someone with a type A personality who's very driven, always hits my goals and targets, like, well, what are you talking about going with the flow? Like, no, I create the flow. What are you gonna get by going with the flow? That's lazy.
Mm.
Right? But that moment I understood what that meant. But what's interesting was, so when this all hit me, and I went to work and I shared this with my partner, right? My partner Josh, and I said, hey, I had this epiphany, and I shared this with him, and instantly he asked me the question. He said, well, how do you know what belongs to you? Right. So in that moment, I thought for a moment and I said, what's interesting, Josh? I don't know what belongs to me. But of the billions of objects and people and opportunities on this planet, I am only attracted to a very tiny fraction of them. Right. Like you look at a car that I may go, wow, she's a beauty, and may not do anything for you. So I don't know why I'm attracted to this car and you're not, right? So in a way, I feel like there's certain things that are already pre-selected for you. So then for me, I just felt, if something moves my heart, excites me, then I'm going to go after it. I'm going to explore. Now, if having tried my best and I'm unable to acquire or obtain this object, then I know it doesn't belong to me. But usually what happens is this object or a person you want to go after or an opportunity, it usually takes you on this journey. And a lot of times it's never that object that's the end, but it's the journey itself. It's a journey of self-discovery, of learning, of growth. Right. And once you've learned what you needed to learn from that experience, from that journey, then the object actually no longer serves a purpose. Right. I mean,
Mm.
I know these people who, they started out going, hey, I want to make this money so I can buy that Ferrari. Right. And then they go on this journey, they make the money. And by the time they have the money, they no longer care about the Ferrari or the car, right? Or whatever it is. So that's, if I had to point at any singular event for my awakening, that was it. But,
Wow.
it was, meeting, there was a girl I dated. We dated very briefly, but she was a person of faith, and when she shared her stories with me, and she could also speak in tongues, which I never had those experiences before, and I have to say she opened the door to God for me, and I told her that. And what's
Mm.
interesting was also I was the first person she really dated, like her first kind of a boyfriend, I would say. So she told me that I opened the door to love for her. But
Wow.
now I know that God and love are the same. So we both
Yeah.
open that same door for each other.
Yeah. What a beautiful connection to have along both you and her journey,
Yeah.
right? In that time. Thank you for sharing that, Tian. A quote comes into mind as I'm listening to you talk and share that experience is that with realization of one's own potential and self-confidence in one's ability, one can build a better world.
Mm.
And so this is a quote by the Dalai Lama. And I love to hear, does that quote resonate with you? And if so, how did you build that muscle of self-confidence in your early entrepreneurial journey?
Honestly, confidence is something I've always had, even since I was a kid.
Can you share an example of, was that something innately that you already had, or was it something you build on early on in childhood?
No, I think it's just something I always had.
Mm.
I don't know how I had it or at what point, but I just, things I loved, I would just do it, and I would just do it really well. And I just knew I could do this. And when I knew something, and I would do it really well. I was a really good runner when I was a child. And also one day I just started dancing too. Like when I hear this music, I mean, I think the first time it was, in the early 80s, I was in China, and some of those like American, like the hip hop, the kind of like movies from early 80s, right? Like rap, the when I listened to that music, I remember it electrified me. And then I just started dancing. I didn't know how. and I was really good at it. So and apparently I have this walk that people, like I remember in college, people, my classmates, even my fraternity brothers would say like, Tian, you have this very distinct walk, like you walk with this oh yeah factor in between each step. And they said, I can recognize you from like a mile away because of this walk. And I didn't know when I had that walk until I think it was in my 30s. I went back to Beijing this one time and reconnected with a childhood friend, right? Someone from my elementary school. And the first thing he noticed about me, he said, Tian, you have that same walk as a child. And I was like, oh my God, really? I've always walked like this?
Nice.
So, and really everyone just says like, it's, you walk like a king. Or my employees would say, you walk like a boss. like you just, you have this confidence. And yeah, so I think, for me, that's just such a gift. It's fortunate that, I didn't have to go out of my way to acquire this, this characteristic.
Mm, got it. I'm feeling this because knowing your energy, Tian, you have that baseline confidence that is magnetic. And with that, it's like, wow, I wish more people know how to tap into that energy from
Mm.
within, right? And that's why, as I was sharing with you before, what was coming to me, the three words actually that came to me I feel as a download as I'm preparing for this interview with you today is that it's the three C's. It was confidence, communication, and compassion.
Hmm.
And I couldn't, once I had those three words in exactly that sequence, I couldn't get out of my mind because I feel that with that inner self confidence, and that's why I picked that Dalai Lama quote, with that inner self confidence, you're able to then extend out of your comfort zone without fear holding you back and not stopping you from taking any action, right? And once you have that self confidence, then you're able to almost like light that inner flame to be able to truly communicate and speak authentically what you're thinking, what direction you want, what change you want to create. And then by having that path of self mastery, then I feel with compassion, then I mean, sky's the limit of what you can create, but also you're fueling with love, not from fear. And so it's really interesting. I didn't know why at the time. Why am I getting these three words coming in the mind? But in hearing your story, it's like, okay, because you're hitting all the 3 points. And that's why I wanted to share and really understand just from your perspective, because it's a blessing to have that confidence and that feeling early on, right? That carries you. And it's very clear how it carries you through your journey and your career and entrepreneurship. But for someone that maybe in our audience that's listening, where maybe that's one part they might be stuck, what can you share in helping them strengthen that muscle?
To be more
Be more
confident.
confident, self-confident, right?
I see. Well, I think this touches upon something we've always talked about, which is self-mastery,
Yes.
right? But I think the first step to self-mastery is to first know thyself, right? But to know thyself, you also have to accept yourself. You have to love yourself. You also have to accept the things that you don't like about yourself. Right? And then from there, you can really build that muscle. So yeah, so I think for a lot of people, it's just, sovereignty is a big thing, right? Sovereignty also know when to say no, right? And to draw boundaries. Like I look at my last cohort, for my mentoring program, and they all happen to be these amazing women, young women in their 20s. And all of them very smart, very capable, very powerful. But the theme that quickly emerged, from our very first session was really the theme of sovereignty, that each one of them was struggling in that, either it's through work because their boss or their bosses just stepped all over them, or because they're so capable, everyone just thought, oh, she can handle it, and they kept giving her more work and more work. But the problem with her was that she kept saying yes. She didn't know how to say no.
Mm.
But she was really unhappy. She really didn't want to do it. And she no longer had a life outside of work. She was completely stressed out. So, that was one person. Another person was in her relationship with her boyfriend. She kept taking on these things and she would do this for her boyfriend and say yes and yes, even though she really did not want to.
Mm.
Right. And so it was just so interesting that, and I noticed this is not unique to just them, to these women in their 20s, right? Even a lot of us, we have issues with sovereignty, with boundaries,
Mm.
right? So I think when you really work on that, that's also going to help you, bolster your self-confidence.
Yeah. Can you describe either one or two actions someone can take or practice to build that sovereignty, as you call it? Because I think first part of it is having that awareness of where you're at, having a good self-assessment of what level you're at. But if you realize that part might be lacking in your life, what can you do to strengthen that?
Ooh, typically for me, it's case by case,
I
and
see.
also I have
Mhm.
to assess each person where they are and then say, oh, given where you are, try this,
I
right?
see.
It's very hard for me to just say, here, use this,
Right. Okay.
not knowing who's listening.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll leave it as that for now. But really, I would say one thing I can speak to, in a, like a general fashion is that it always comes from a place of fear when you
Mm.
say yes, even when you want to say no, right? Because for say a lot of people, because they don't want they want to be liked by others, right? They don't want to disappoint other people, and for some people, they're such a givers in nature that it's actually very hard for them to say no. They rather put the burden on them, but that's not kind to yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then later on, it could build resentment inside,
Mm.
right? And also, if you're doing something that you don't want to do, you're not going to do it from a place of joy, right? And if you're not doing it from a place of joy, then that energy of resentment or whatever else is going into that very thing that you're doing. And so the end result won't be that great either, right? It's like,
Right.
I refuse to cook when I'm angry or sad. That's a rule I gave myself, right? Because I don't want to put that anger or sadness into my food, which then I'm gonna eat or I'll feed to my girlfriend or other people, and now I'm literally poisoning them,
Mm.
since everything is energy.
This is why like we're soul brothers here because we're speaking the same language. And I get you 100%. I think that's a really great self-awareness to just even as simple as just if you're cooking with the wrong state of mind, wrong state of energy, knowing that that can transfuse into the food that you can consume is I really I believe in that. And what comes to me, I'm getting tingly feelings. So I feel like this is my intuition sharing that what hit a note what you shared earlier is that in that pursuit of sovereignty, having the grace and space to understand that no is also a positive action that you can take.
Yes,
Because I think maybe the misconception might be, and this might be pre-programming or whatever it is, a belief system, but to take action is to say yes. And that's not always the case. No can also be a positive action. And it goes to your point about setting healthy boundaries. But what is this foreign language you're talking about? So how does that mean? How can that apply? But that's what came to me as you were sharing is, hey, no can be an action. Pausing to reflect can be also an action. You don't want to stay stagnant, but having pause to reflect, that can also be an action you can take. It doesn't have to be so black and white.
absolutely. And also, what else I learned, since my awakening was that patience and also waiting, these are not passive things at all. It takes a lot of energy for you to be patient and to wait on something, right? And it's not a passive act. So again, there's a lot. I mean, before, I was in my 20s and early 30s, I was not a very patient person at all. Right? But it was really later on I learned, that's something I really got to work on. And it just also just let the universe do its job, right? Like when you put out a request, you put out this prayer, you got to trust that the universe is working on your behalf. All these energies have to align, right? It's all these things are happening. But a lot of times, because of our fear, our impatience, we go, wait, why hasn't anyone called me? Or why did this person not respond to my email? And so you follow up with this email, right? Not giving it some time. And then your action actually then, unbeknownst to you, really blocks this certain manifestation from happening.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
I get that. I get that. And I want to touch on a word you used earlier to go a little bit more in detail, which is you mentioned about higher self. And
mm,
so in your awakening, your spiritual journey, and this word higher self, how would you describe it to someone that might be just one step behind of their awakening in their spiritual path? What does that mean to you? And how can someone connect with that? Because that's a difference between, because you mentioned a couple of times about inner voice, right? So what's the difference between, in your definition, inner voice versus higher self?
mm. So your higher self really, so ooh, we're getting into some pretty esoteric stuff. So your higher self to me is really more of your oversoul. So if you really look at this human soul, the soul is actually, how do you even say this? What's inside each incarnation or each human body is actually a fragment of your oversoul. Your oversoul is so ginormous, it can break itself up into infinite pieces. And each piece goes into a time and space to experience something.
Hmm.
But yet each soul, each piece, each fragment is connected to this oversoul. Okay. And so if you know how to tap into your oversoul, then you're actually able to communicate and actually receive information from all these other pieces. So there's another aspect of you, say, who is a martial arts expert. You can instantly go, I know Kung Fu. Or this other piece of you is, a violin virtuoso. You can instantly, when you know how to tap into that part of you, you can just pick up a violin and play. So your higher self is this wise, infinite part of you who, just knows and sees all of it. So I just see myself here, I'm serving the creator and, having this experience, every morning when I wake up, the first thing I say, dear creator, please use me as a vessel, as a conduit to serve you in the best and highest way today. Right. So that's really, what I'm here to do is to serve all humanity, to serve all life, and to serve our creator.
Yeah. No,
So,
it reminds me the energy I feel when you were sharing that. In case if people haven't seen this movie, but there's a Michelle Yeoh movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once,
yes,
right? It's
great
like
movie.
it's interesting because I think you're touching on some themes that they touched on in that movie too, which is really fascinating. But just knowing that, hey, there's all these different realities. I mean, they even touched on it in Avengers, right? There's all these different realities happening at the same time. Which timeline are you on?
Yes.
But it's coming from the baseline is it's coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of fear or anger or negative emotions per se, but it's really coming from a place of love.
Yes. Absolutely.
Beautiful. From your entrepreneurship, but now also mentoring people. I mean, can you share a little bit about where they felt stuck? Aside from sovereignty that you touched on, what is another roadblock that you've seen presently right now that people might have been encountering in their pursuit of life journey of self-mastery?
Well, the lack of self-confidence, which is something we
Mm,
talked about before,
right.
right? Not trusting themselves, right? A lot of
Mm,
the people I mentored, they're actually extremely intuitive, right? Very connected to spirit. Yet they will always doubt themselves. They'll be like, "Well, did I really see that? Is that where did that voice come from? Where did that information come from? I don't have data to back it. Like, should I listen to it?" Right? The moment you start having, self-doubt, it's it pretty much offsets, whatever positive stuff that you were going to bring in,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
That reminds me back when I was in my second chapter as an investment officer, I lived very much in the left brain, right? 100% logic, back it up with data. And I didn't really understand the word intuition to the extent that I understand it now. And I wouldn't say I'm an expert of it. I'm still a life student of it. But one thing I've learned to lean in more on is that intuitive voice, that gut feeling, because yeah, it's a different tone. It comes in different ways for people. Sometimes it's auditory, sometimes it's visual, right? Sometimes it's, through physical touch, right? Whatever it may
Or
be.
it's a sensation.
It's sensation, right? And the thing is that when I have these intuitive messages that come in without letting my logic mind override saying, wait, that doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. Like if it's not gonna put myself, I feel in harm's way, just give it a try because chances are there's a reason why I'm getting that intuition message and it's serving me in a way that I might not see right in front of me, but oh, 1 mile down the road, okay, I get it. That's why. It's always in hindsight, right?
Exactly. And it's something I spoke to my mentees about too, which is the voice of your ego versus the voice of your heart. And how do
Ooh,
you distinguish between the two, right? And that's what you're saying, this intuition voice. It's always that's the voice from your heart. And in my experience, that's always this very quiet voice. It's a voice that's not trying to get your attention in the sense that listen to me. You have to listen to me. I will bring you pleasure. Right? Like, no, it would just say its thing and then step back again. It's like whether you take it or not, this voice doesn't have any attachment. Right? Where's your ego? If your ego wants something, it's gonna keep knocking on you like ice cream. So go get the ice cream. Go get it. Go get it now. Right? Like until you got the ice cream, that voice doesn't. It's just gonna. It's always there. It's repeating itself.
yeah.
Voice of your heart's voice doesn't do that. It's very quiet. It's very soft, and a lot of times it will tell you something that one you don't think it makes any sense because you have no data to prove this, to back this, and two, a lot of times it will tell you to do something that you actually don't want to do because it's not as pleasurable.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas your ego is constantly telling you to do something that's very pleasurable, at least
Mm,
only in the short term. You may regret the next day, right? Go to that
mm.
party, drink that alcohol, go home with that girl, right? Like all these voices that it's all about short-term pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's, the way I describe it too on my show is that your intuition is very similar to like your soul GPS. And it's giving you gentle guidance on whether are you on course or doing a course correct. And when you think about that voice when Siri is on or whatever it is, right? Depending on what phone you have, it's like, turn right or keep going, right? And it's always the same tone. It's very gentle and it's never overpowering. But it's really your decision whether you need, you want to keep moving forward or not. You still have power of free will, but it's because it's so gentle. It's just you have to be able to quiet the mind at least to be able to understand and let that signal come through, so that you can hear it and that you're not. What I say is about how do you quiet that wind tunnel.
Exactly. Now, there is one thing that if you don't listen to this voice that tells you, say, you need to leave this relationship, or you need to leave this job, or you really need to pursue that. If you don't listen to this voice, well, what happened is for some reason, you just won't feel good. Even though you don't hear this voice, but you won't feel happy. And that's something I've observed. You see these, for instance, investment bankers who, they make lots of money, right? They have every toy under the sun. And this is something that their parents wanted them to do. And now their parents are very proud of them. Their peers are very right? And envious of them. All these things, yet they wake up in the morning. I'm not saying every investment banker, but there are certain ones in my lives, they wake up every day hating their lives. Like
Hmm.
I really don't want to go to work. I hate my job. I hate the people I'm with. I hate what I'm doing. But then this other part of, this logic part, like, what's wrong with me? I'm making so much money. I have such a prestigious job working at such a prestigious firm. Why don't I like this? And they can't justify it. It's
Mm,
because you won off of your course,
mm,
right? So that's the one thing, I would say that, we're all born with this internal GPS, this internal compass. And what is that compass, right? That compass really is just your feelings. Because if you're doing your life path on the path that you're meant for, you will feel good. You'll wake up every day feeling very happy, feeling energized, passionate, right? And you're just ready for your day. But if you're not on that path, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter how glorious, your position is.
yeah.
You're gonna wake up feeling very unhappy.
Mm. What comes to me as I'm listening to you, Tian, is that it's almost that difference between a push and pull effect. It's like when you're pushing yourself to do something, then there's going to be that sensation of drag because it's not something necessarily you might not want to do. Versus if you're pulled to something, it's like, hey, there's a higher reason, there's a higher purpose. Like I feel compelled to, then it's a different sensation where it's like there's that innate drive I feel that will kind of come out when you're pulled to a specific vision or a specific purpose. And it doesn't have to be like purpose isn't like a final destination. It's just part of your journey too, because that will pivot. And once you reach that milestone, as things unfold too. And so it's not like, one and final kind of thing, but that's been my experience as I'm going through. And that's what kind of comes to me as I'm listening to you.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that at least speaking for myself, I was never taught to follow my feelings, to listen to my feelings, right? If anything, turn that off. Don't be a sissy,
Yeah.
right? But really, that's a signal from your soul telling you, hey, you're off the path. Like, get back onto your path. And if you don't listen, your soul will arrange certain events to help you get back onto your path, right? And that could
Right.
be either like an accident, or you get laid off at work, or some kind of health issue. You may have some come down with some kind of horrible disease,
Yeah.
right? And these are your soul's way or your higher self's way of getting your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always better when you recognize it early on. We don't want to, who wants to experience, a horrible disease or, or a car accident?
Mm,
Nobody. So if you recognize these signals early on, then you can course correct and then you won't have to.
mm,
Right. But really, I mean, what's life? Life is just a series of choices. That's it.
mm,
Any moment we're making a different choice, right?
mm.
What is the choice? And the choice you make takes you onto a different path or a different timeline. That's really all there is.
Yeah.
Even something as small as, always turning left at this, light, right, on your way to work. If one day you decide, what happens if I just keep going straight and I'll turn at a different light? You're now on a different trajectory, on a different timeline.
Mm.
Right? Even something as
Yeah. No, no, you're right. And it's about building that muscle to not let fear take in to keep you in the status quo, but to go outside a boundary, right? I mean, at least my next question, Tian, because when you think about the physiology of building a muscle, it's going and extending your limit to create those micro tears in your muscle so that it can repair and strengthen, right? That's how you build muscle. You have to be able to go outside your comfort zone to be able to do that. And so, metaphorically speaking, when it comes to just even your own personal growth, or whether you're in a stage of self confidence, whether you're in a stage of communication or compassion, whatever it may be, it's like, what advice would you be able to share with our audience on how do you begin that habit of getting outside of that comfort zone? Because that's how you can really start not just building confidence, but that muscle of not just only accepting status quo.
So, when I started my first company, right, Naked Sky Entertainment, I noticed that every time So one of the first things I did when I formed my company was I put together this stellar advisory board, right? Like this, I had a legal advisor, I had business advisor, I had marketing advisor, I have financial advisor, right? People are at the top of their game in their respective field, right? And so every time one of them would tell me something that was going to move the company forward, something that was really good for the company, I would get this feeling in my stomach. It was almost like a knot, like this, like a cringe kind of feeling, right? Just it's like, ooh, like I knew, oh, it's a lot of work to do this. But at the same time, I also knew, I recognized that feeling, go, this is the right thing to do.
Mm,
I want to really take this company to the next level. I needed to do this. So every time I felt that feeling, I knew I needed to lean into it. I need to actually do this instead of shying away or running away from it. Right. So sometimes it's just as simple as that. It's just, when you're being pushed into this like a whole new territory, or you're now outside of your comfort zone because you don't feel comfortable. Right. It's times like that, then instead of doing what you've always done, which is, okay, well, let me step back into my comfort zone because that's what makes me comfortable. Say yes to this and see where it
mm,
goes. Just
yeah.
yes, just try it. See what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I love that, Tian, because what's coming to me is, I mean, because we talked about not just feelings, but also manifestation. And it doesn't mean by the ability to manifest and be able to feel through it, doesn't mean that everything's going to be smooth sailing, right? Like there's good resistance and there's bad resistance. And what I got from you is that even though that knot that you felt might feel like there's this inner resistance in you, but you know the sensation of it to know you need that resistance to catapult you to that next level.
Exactly.
If you're in space and there's zero gravity and you have literally no resistance, you can't move forward,
Right.
right? And so think about it. You're going to need something to push up against. And that's the thing where you just got to be able to be in tune just with your body and your mind of understanding what resistance are you feeling, but what is good resistance so that you know this is an action you need to take to move forward to that next level.
Right. And I'm sure it's all case by case. Each
Yeah.
person's different. So your signal may be different. For me, it was this feeling in my stomach.
Yeah.
Right. But once I recognized it, I was like, oh, so then to me, I'm like, I started looking for that feeling. It's like, so every time that feeling turns on, I know I need to do this thing.
Yeah.
Right. So then later,
Yeah.
and actually, after I would say maybe 3, 4 years, that feeling completely went away because I think maybe my higher self realized, oh, I didn't need that anymore. Like I knew
Mm,
better now. Right. But also just like what you said earlier, you use the analogy of working out, right? Like you're building a certain muscle. I mean, to build your muscle, when you work out, it is not comfortable, right? It is pain. But that's where growth comes from, right?
yeah.
Not saying, I don't know that I fully believe the saying, no pain, no gain. I
Mm,
don't think it to be that way necessarily, but in certain situations, just like if you want to build your muscles, right, you got to work them. And when you do, you are going to feel that that sore, that that pain the next day. Because if you don't, then oh, you didn't really work it, and of course your muscle isn't going to grow.
yeah. I totally agree. I don't like this new word or this day and age where we're in this hustle and grind mindset, right? No pain, no gain, right? Just gotta be daily grinding it. And it's like, wait, it's like, well, at the end of the day, you gotta be able to take a pause, look up and saying, are you even going in the right direction? Because if you're not doing something, I mean, like, you mentioned about your friends that were eye bankers. It's like, if you're not doing something that's really bringing you joy, then to what end are you really inflicting pain to gain for what, right? It's got to, if you have something that's pulling you something where you feel compelled to, then that pain is going to be a very different sensation as you're elevating and growing.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, Tian, in terms of the last couple of years of books that you've read that had a positive or profound impact on your journey to date, what book would you recommend for our audience?
Oh my God, too many.
Using your
Again, it's one of those
intuition, use your
things
intuition.
where,
What's the first book that comes into mind?
okay, well, I'll recommend a few where you are. I mean, one book is called The Four Agreements.
Hmm.
Right, you may have, yeah, it's this little book, so just full of wisdom, right, by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Hmm.
Right. That book is fantastic. It's and I absolutely live by those four agreements in my life, right? Which is, always do your best, be impeccable with your word, right? Don't take anything personally, and don't make assumptions. Don't assume things. So that's a fantastic book. Another book is called Hidden Messages in Water by Dr. Masaru Emoto. He was able to take these photographs of water crystals and show you what's in water. And really, we've now learned in science that water contains memory of everything. Whatever water rolls over, it will acquire and retain the memory of that thing, right? And what's interesting also is that, I don't know if this is in that book, but water throughout the world, whether it's an ocean and a stream, all water talks to each other. It's really fascinating. And you can actually, when you put prayer in water, the water crystal changes. So if you go to like a very polluted lake, for instance, you take out that water sample, you take a picture of that water crystal, you see how it looks. And then, one thing he did was he'll bring these Buddhist monks, and they just stand next to water and they pray for an hour. And then they take out that water again and take a picture. The crystal completely changes.
Mm.
It's amazing. It just shows you, look, we're 70-80% water in our body, right? And what are we putting in our water every day? Are these positive thoughts or negative thoughts?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that's another very powerful book. Another one is Conversations with God. It's a phenomenal book, right, by Neil Donald Walsh. It's not a Christian book, right? And this is a book I tried to avoid it for a long time because I was like, well, I'm not religious, right? But then, and this book found its way to me through many means, and finally, yeah, how it came to me, I started reading. I was like, oh my God, this is life changing. So
Mm.
that's another phenomenal book. So again, really, it just depends on where each person is, on his or her journey.
Yeah.
If you're looking at something to help you with your abundance or wealth consciousness, Happy Money is a fantastic book, right, by Ken Honda.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. I mean, it just too many. I mean, I didn't read. I think in my mid-20s, I accepted the fact that I wasn't a reader. That's what I told myself. I didn't enjoy reading, because again, I think I was forced to read in high school, in college. I read a lot of books that I just didn't find interesting or relevant. So I just thought, you know what? I just don't enjoy reading. So I stopped reading. But after my spiritual awakening, I could not stop reading. So I've been
Mm.
reading for the past, what is it now, 13 years,
Yeah.
nonstop. I'm constantly, I have a rotation of books that I'm reading. So
I love that. Tian, so I think you'll appreciate this too, is what we started doing with in our family, and this started, gosh, it started at least 5 years ago, is that, our home in our kitchen, we have like a water filter, right? Filtration. And it goes through the system before it, goes through that spout where we get our drinking water. But what I started doing in that, look, we're all energy. Water can retain, as you're saying, memory, but also energy. And so what we did was on a post-it note, we'll write whatever words we want to infuse in our family, love, compassion, abundance, whatever it is, and write it on a post-it. And I stick that post-it on the water filter machine because as water goes through it, this is what I wanted to infuse.
I have that very same thing.
And this is why we're soul brothers, right?
One of many reasons. I mean,
One of many
actually,
reasons.
I have these gallon water jugs, right? They're crystal, and actually, it was my spirit guides that told me to do this. So I have these, and then I write on a piece of paper, whatever that I want in my body, in my being, in
Yeah.
my life, and I write
Yeah.
on that piece of paper. I put this jug on top of it,
Yeah.
right? And then so I'm just drinking that energy into my body. And just,
Yeah.
before the show, I want to get a glass of water. This is from that, right? And it says, I am happy, I am healthy, I am abundant, I am free, and a few of these things. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so Tian, in terms of just wrapping up, there's two more questions I'd like to ask you. One, which is a question I always ask my guests, is that if the DeLorean was real and they can travel back in time, let's say you could travel back 15 years ago. So this would be before your spiritual awakening. Okay. What would you share if you can meet your younger self? What's one piece of advice or thought that you would share if you can meet your younger self 15 years ago?
Okay, I would tell him to be more humble.
Mm.
Yeah, I was not very humble in my younger years, and I'm still
Mm.
working on that. And because of it, again, it goes kind of with the territory of, someone being, pretty smart and capable and, has pretty much achieved everything you set your mind to do, right? So you think, oh, you know everything, you know it all, you can't be wrong. And when you have that kind of mindset, then you start making mistakes,
Mm.
right? And then you don't listen.
Yeah.
So at least this is for me, if I could go back in time 20 years, 15 years, I would tell that 20 something year old, wow, actually, yeah, 29-year-old, be humble.
Got it.
Whether he will listen or not, again.
Yeah. Well, but the intent I hear from you in sharing that wisdom of being humble is so that you allow yourself to listen more with the people around you,
Yes, to be more open.
to be open.
Yes, to be more open, because you don't know what you don't know. That's the truth, right? You
Yeah.
know what you know. That's the smallest circle. Then you know what you don't know, right? That's a bigger circle. And then you don't know what you don't know. And that's the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
Or the rest of that entire space.
Yeah.
Right. And you just don't know. So listen more.
Yeah.
Right? Be humble.
I love it. I love it. So last question, Tian. Where can our listeners find you?
Oh, well, LinkedIn. I don't really do social media much. So I don't have a Twitter account or anything like that. So, LinkedIn is probably the best place. Just look up Tian, Tian, and then last name MU, and then you can find me there.
Perfect. Perfect. And just so my audience, because I think that's might be a question they might be asking, is that since you did mention about your mentoring program that you did, that's something you're taking a pause now, or is that something you might want to kick back up again in the future? Or where are you in that
It's more
journey?
case by case, because right now I'm working on a few projects, right?
Yeah.
So I'm only working for the time being, working with the people that have committed to, these are people that came out of the cohorts, and I didn't really have, I had a curriculum for them, and I was like, I don't have anything else. They're like, please let me stay. So I said, okay, let's just work on you case by case. But if there's someone who really is, if our message today really resonates and they feel, oh, I really need this, reach out to me, and we can have a conversation. I'm here, like I said, I'm here to serve. Right. It just, if there's that space, that time, there's the right alignment, I will say yes.
Love it. Thank you, brother. I thank you so much for joining us today, Tian. I'm very grateful that it was Roberta that connected us.
Yes.
And through that connection, there's just been so much beauty and light, just knowing who you are, but what you bring to the world and knowing what you're going to do to help impact positively to it. And to the extent that I can help you along that journey, the things we can co-create, like I am really looking forward to that. So thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us today.
And you as well. Thank you, brother.
Folks, that was such an enriching conversation. There's so many seeds of wisdom that Tian dropped today. I really feel today's interview is best summarized by the Dalai Lama quote I shared earlier, which is, with realization of one's own potential and self-confidence in one's ability, one can build a better world. Through your self-confidence, reclaim your power and sovereignty so that you can communicate your inner truth your authentic truth. And through self-compassion and love, you can achieve self-mastery in creating a fulfilling life. If you feel compelled to reach out to Tian, he did want me to mention that on LinkedIn, make sure you say you heard him on this Boom Vision podcast so that he knows where the connection is coming from. If you enjoyed today's interview, please share this episode with your loved ones and friends that you feel can benefit. I really appreciate you joining us today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so that we can thrive together with a stronger mind, body, and soul. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in delight. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.